Okay, we have to talk a little bit. What's the avodas Ketores? What's the purpose of the avodas Ketores? And what does Ketores mean? What does it achieve? And then we'll try to conclude with, since we're learning a sugya that's really not so prevalent, unfortunately, Bizman Hazeh, and in fact, there's an Isur Gomor to make Ketores today. Via Shleimar, all types of Ketores. So, what's avodas Ketores today? We learn about the Mon, we learn about the Geshem. These are things that are tangible in our reality. What's the avodah? What's the pnimius of the avodah of a person that's connected to Ketores? If we understand what the avodah Ketores is, what is the service of Ketores, we can understand a little bit what is the objective.
And Mon is more so than potatoes.
We spoke about Mon, you weren't here, maybe. But Mon, we talked about how it's relevant today. There's a chila of a Talmud Chacham, the chila of Shabbos, a chila of Talmud Chacham is even higher than a chilas Mon. But that's for another time, this morning, this sugya. Okay, so we'll start off with a very klotz kasha. Klotz kasha is a very simple question that's asked by all the Rishonim, many Rishonim and many Achronim, asked a simple shaila on the Mizbeach HaPnimi. We know that in Parshas Truma, the Torah tells us that there is, in Truma, the Torah tells us that you have to make a Beis HaMikdash, you have to make a Mishkan Yekar Mikdash. And in this Beis HaMikdash, in this Mishkan, there's certain kelim. There's Mizbeach HaChitzon, there's the Shulchan, there's the Menorah, there's the Aron. And this is what Parshas Truma tells us. Then it talks about the structure, the building, the actual structure of the Mishkan. So it talks about the building. Parshas Tetzaveh, which is, Tetzaveh is not about the Kli HaMikdash, not about the utensils or the kelim of the Mikdash, but Parshas Tetzaveh, and the portion of Tetzaveh, the Torah talks about the Gavra, not about the Chefza of the Beis HaMikdash, but the Gavra, the person that's serving in the Beis HaMikdash. Who's this Gavra serving in the Beis HaMikdash? The Kohen. So how does the Kohen have to dress? What is the garments of the Kohen? How does he become a Kohen? How does he initiate into Kohuna? This is in Parshas Tetzaveh. But if you look through the Torah, the Mizbeach HaPnimi is mentioned not in Parshas Truma, but it mentions in Parshas Tetzaveh. And of course, this is an obvious question, and many of the Rishonim ask this question. The Even Ezer, first from Divrei Rishonim, will say a few Pirushim, we'll see what the oimik of this is. So the Even Ezer writes that, and Betzim later the Kli Yakar is going to, with the measurements of the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the Kli Yakar is going to take a lot of these basic ideas from the Even Ezer to see the godless of the Mizbeach HaPnimi. So the Even Ezer writes that if you look at the koima, the height of the Mizbeach HaPnimi, which is 2 amas, which is higher than the Shulchan, which is Amma V'chetzi, and it's higher than the Menorah, which the Torah doesn't say how big it is, but it could be 18 Tfachim, and so it was not so large, not so big. The Aron, the actual structure of the Aron was also 2 amas. The Kanfayim with the Kruvim on top of it made it 10 amas, which is very big, but the actual Aron itself was very small. And the Mizbeach HaPnimi is the same size as the Aron, it's 2 amas kamasei. So the Even Ezer says that the reason why the Torah places the laws of Mizbeach HaPnimi to make the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the internal altar, in Parshas Tetzaveh, not in Parshas Truma, because the Mizbeach HaPnimi has a higher service. It's even higher, it's more exalted. And the proof is that you see that it's 2 amas. The Ramban says a similar thing. The Ramban says that after the Torah tells you about the Mishkan and the Kelim, then comes the Mizbeach HaPnimi, which is avodas Ketores, to show that there's Ashras HaShechina, that the Ketores shows that the presence of the Shechina. So it's actually something even higher. This is a lot of the things that we actually learned. And Sforno writes, which is also in Divrei Rishonim, the last of the Rishonim, he writes that it's the opposite. It's the opposite. The reason why the Mizbeach HaPnimi is mentioned after everything is because the Mizbeach HaPnimi is a secondary thing. Mizbeach HaPnimi is secondary. In a house, it says you need a table. Okay, that's the Shulchan. You need an Aron, which is he says it's a kisei, it's a chair. You need a menorah, you need light. But you need it to smell nicely in your home. I mean, it's a pleasant thing if the home has a pleasant smell, but it's not. And what if it has no smell? Also not terrible. 1 second. But so if it doesn't have a foul odor or it doesn't have a very pleasant odor, it smells. Not terrible. So he says the idea, the Seforno says, that the reason why the Mizbeach HaPnimi is placed at the end is because the Mizbeach HaPnimi is for the pleasant odor that exists within the Mishkan, and that's secondary. So we see from the Divrei HaRishonim that the Avodah of Ketores can be seen either something that's very high, higher, which many of you learned today in the Zohar, higher than the Avodah of the Aron, higher than the Avodah of Mizbeach HaChitzon, higher than the Menorah. And then you see from Divrei HaRishonim, actually it's the opposite. That it could be that it's the opposite because it's only odor. So is it essential or is it secondary? This is the question. Or is it both? Is it so essential that it's only secondary, or so secondary it's essential? Something like this. Is it essential avodah? Is it avodah tama? Is it complete? Is it? Or is it there to an added ambiance? We have to understand what Ketoret is to understand this question. In the Achronim, it's brought down, the Malbim brings it down, the Meshech Chachma brings it down, the Ksav Kabbalah brings it down, B'Shem Agra. It's brought down in many, many different commentaries, that the Avodah Ketores is very, very unusual because the Rambam Paskins in Hilchos Tmidim Musafim in chapter 3, Halacha Aleph, according to the Gemara in Zvachim, the Rambam Paskins that you're allowed to bring Avodah Ketores even without the Mizbeach. If you know where the Mizbeach HaPnimi was, the location of the Mizbeach HaPnimi, that's sufficient enough to bring the Avodah Ketores. So you don't actually need the Mizbeach itself. So this seems also that it's like a less avodah. Every other avodah, every other service in the Beis HaMikdash, you can't light the menorah without a menorah. You can't bring a carbon. There's something about it that just it's like it doesn't really. It's not dependent on the Mizbeach HaPnimi. It's not dependent on this Mizbeach. There's got a sefer by David C. Hoffman. I don't know if you heard of him or you didn't hear of him, but he's a very chashavi that lived in Germany. One of the Talmidim of Rosh Hashanah Hirsch, and he has a very important sefer on Vayikra, and he writes that the avodah, the work of Ketores, the service of Ketores, is like mugmar. Mugmar is what we'll translate, even though today it's maybe not such a prevalent practice, but some people you have a good meal, and after you have a meal, you take a cigarette. You smoke up, you light up. Should I smoke up? Is not the right word. You light up. So this idea is mugmar means it's like an after effect. After you finish, this is what you do. So he says this is the proof that the Avodah Ketores is like an after. You do all the things that are function that you need, and then it's like an extra thing that you do. He says this is also the answer to the question of why the Mizbeach. It's also a klotz kasha, a very simple question. Why is the Mizbeach HaPnimi called Mizbeach? Mizbeach. The word Mizbeach comes from, what's the root of the word Mizbeach? Zevach. Zevach means a shechita. Zevach means to slaughter. Mizbeach HaChitzon is a Mizbeach. Mizbeach HaChitzon is a Mizbeach because the only way the service of the Mizbeach HaChitzon is through a carbon, through offering. What's the Mizbeach HaPnimi? You're not offering anything. It's carbon. There's no shechita. It's Ketores. There's no shechita. So he says Mizbeach HaPnimi is the hashlama, is the completion of what happens in the Mizbeach HaChitzon. It's the conclusion. You ate the meal, and after you finish eating the meal, you light up and you have a cigarette. And you shouldn't say this, but you have dessert. But the cigarette works better because it's actually smoke. That's the idea. So he says this is another way of looking at avodah, the service of Mizbeach HaPnimi. So we have the Divrei HaRishonim and Divrei Gdolei HaAchronim. We have these two understandings of either it's essential or it's a secondary. It's like an after meal thing. And there's some oimek to this. There's some depth to this machloikas. Another machloikas HaRishonim that we have is machloikas HaRishonim that we find between. It's not such a clear machloikas, but it seems to be a machloikas HaRishonim, which some of you may have learned. The machloikas HaRishonim between the Rambam and Sefer HaChinuch and the Chinuch. The Rambam, and the other Chazaka doesn't say, but in the Moyer Nevuchim, The Rambam writes in Chela Gimel Nun Hey, Mem Hey, that the odor of the Beis Hamikdash, you can imagine how it smelled. He says people were offering karbonos and it was gory and it was blood. He said also the garments that the Kohen was wearing smelled. It's if you ever walked into a tannery or if you ever walked into Shlachtos, it's not the most pleasant odor. You would think that this is the place, this is Makam HaShechina, Makam of Kvod Hashem. He said that the smell reeked. So the Rambam says that the purpose of the Ketores was to eradicate, to negate the negative smell from the karbonos and to create a positive smell. This is what the Rambam writes. The Chinuch writes, in the Lashon of the Chinuch, Lahagdel Kvod Habayis, V'yidnua sha'adam ne'nenis boi mis'avel ov moishach halev harbe. The Chinuch writes, doesn't write about the negation of negative, just writes about the positive. To create a positive ambiance of pleasant odor that exists in the Beis Hamikdash, there was Avodas HaKetoros. This is what the Chinuch says. On this Rambam, Rabbeinu B'chai writes very sharp words on this Rambam. The B'chai of Shmois writes, Chas v'shalom. It says Chas v'shalom to say that the whole purpose of the Avodas HaKetoros is to eradicate the foul odor of a behema, of the par that was nishchat. It can be. If you look in the Zohar actually writes, the Zohar Chodesh Shir Hashirim writes that the purpose of the Ketores was to eradicate koiches hatuma, the koiches hatuma, the negative odors of tuma. And upon this, the Kotzker, some of you learned, the Kotzker writes, also brought down in Kutei Sichos, not Moshe Kotzker, that the pnimius of the Rambam, the depth of what the Rambam's writing is the same as what the Zohar is writing. That the eradication of negative, we'll see why there's something to this understanding, that the eradication of the negative is really, what the Rambam is really trying to say is the eradication of the negative koiches atuma in the world. We know, I should say we, as a collective we, at least people in this room understand, that the Sod is not, the depth of Pshat is not the opposite of Pshat. The Sod is the Oimek Pshat. It's not that the Sod is telling you the secret of Kabbalah, of Zohar, is telling you something that's not the Pshat. The Zohar's Megala is revealing what is the Oimek Pshat, what's actually happening in the Pshat. So what the Pshat is, what it's saying is that of course it's eradicating the negative smells of animals. But what does it mean? What's the depth of negative odor in this world? The depth of something that smells terribly is a type of death. Death creates a bad odor. And the higher the level of tuma, which means the higher the level of the being, the deeper and the more foul the odor is. If you don't have to use graphic imagination, but a leaf that dies doesn't smell. Smells very little. But an apple that rots smells a little worse, and a carcass of an animal smells even worse, and lahavdil, a human being, can smell even much more terrible. Which means, and that's all also levels of tumah, spiritual tumah. A rock doesn't become tamei, and then something chiyutan, something that's a living thing can have tumah, and has more tumah, to all vivo is the tumah, which is the mes atzmai. So according to the level of the tumah is actually the odor. So when the Rambam writes that it's to negate the odor that's going on because of the slaughtering of the animals, the depth of that pshat is that there's actually a tumah that's connected to this type of death, and the koyach of Ketores is to eradicate or eliminate or elevate, we'll see soon, and then even not only to do that, but to actually create a pleasant smell. That's what Ketores is. Ketores is that type of avodah. In general, this is a side note, in general, the idea of more like the Chinuch writes is just to create a positive odor, not so much eradicate. We're going to use more the Shittas Rambam, the Rambam's understanding, the Moreh Nevuchim, and like we said from the Zohar Chodesh in Shir Hashirim. But the basic idea of the Sefer Chinuch is actually brought down in Halacha. We know this in Halacha, but we're not going to get into the details. It's a long sugya in Brachas. which talks about graf shalri, when there's certain situations where you're not allowed to daven because of a certain smell. Not only that it is optically something is disturbing to you, and therefore you can't have kavana, but if you're not in the place that has the proper smell, something has a foul odor, then you shouldn't smell. You shouldn't daven there, even if you can't see it. If something has a very foul odor, because it's distracting. And it's brought down in halacha, based on the Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara says here that even if the thing has just not a terrible smell, but an unpleasant smell, not from ray, not from waste, or not from feces, even there you shouldn't daven. And the Gemara says, and Brachas also Daf Lamed Dal, the Gemara says that Daniel daven eitz al chaloin, he mispal eitz al chaloin. So the Api halacha, it's brought down in halacha. In Shulchan Aruch, it's brought down that the Beis HaKnesset should have windows. So one of the reasons that's brought down Pashtus, the reason why a shul should have windows is it should look upwards. But Rabbeinu Yoiner writes on that Gemara that part of the reason to have windows in a shul is they should have a pleasant odor. That means we have to create a space that has a pleasant odor. This is one thing, and this is the shitta, more of the shittas of Rabbeinu Shittas HaChinuch. Incidentally, also the Chovos HaLevavos, Rabbeinu Bechaya writes about the same idea that if a person wants to meditate, wants to focus, wants to be in a better space, they have to make sure that the odor is a fresh air and there's a pleasant smell. That's the Shittas HaChinuch. But we're going to go more with the Shittas HaRambam, that there's something about the Ketores that eliminates negativity and transforms it into something positive. So we know that the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. What does the word Ketores mean? We have to start. What does the word Ketores mean? So the word Ketores, Rashi writes, Rashi in Shmois Chafei writes, that the word Ketores comes from the word kitar, smoke, trumas ashan. That Ketores means smoke. That's what Ketores means. In the Zohar, which also the Rekanti brings down, the Zohar says that Ketores, the word Ketores, is not connected to kitar, which is smoke, which in Lashon Kodesh, which is in the Hebrew language, which is the language of the Torah, is smoke. But the word Ketores means ketira. V'chad ketira is katrana. Ketira means tied. To tie. Like kasher in Hebrew, ketira means to tie. Okay, this is Lashon Gemara also, when the Gemara calls a tie, the Gemara talks about ketara is something that's tied together, a bundle, something that's bundled together. So the word Ketores comes from the word ketira. So we have two shittas again. We have the shittas Rashi, that Ketores comes from the word of Asham. And we have the shitta, what the Zohar says, which is Lashon Arami, which is Aramaic, which is a strange thing that the Torah will use an Aramaic phrase. But the Aramaic phrase is Ketira, is V'chatchir, is Katrana, which means that it's a voida of unifying, connecting. So let's go start with Rashi. That the voida Ketores is the idea of smoke, is Asham. So in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Mishkan, there was something about being in the presence of the Mishkan that we had to create this place and create smoke in this space. So we have to understand what is the oimik of what is smoke? What is smoke? Where does smoke come from? So there's two things that happen about smoke. First of all, smoke, Ashan, which is Ketores, Kitar, a bellowing fire that's creating smoke. Asham is created by a davar shenichla. Asham is created by something that is expiring. Right? That's what a fire. The fire, let's say, is consuming a piece of paper. And as it's consuming the paper, as the paper is mashana tzuris, changing its form and becoming something else, it's creating smoke. And the smoke is actually probably part of it as well. But it's the releasing of energy, but it's occurring b'shas in the process of this thing dying. As this thing is dying, there's a smoke that's being elevated.
The conservation of mass. It's just changing.
It's just changing form, right? We'll get to that in a second. But there's something about this surah dying, and as the surah is dying, the Har Sinai Oshin Kuloi, that the Har Sinai was an elevation of the Har Sinai, and as the process of it being elevated, it's being Meshanat Surah, changing its form, is creating smoke. That's one thing. Another thing is that smoke, physically, if you look at smoke, what does smoke do? Smoke is that there's something present, let's say there's a piece of paper over here, and you light this paper, the smoke somehow just visually, takes this paper and elevates it higher. Right? You're taking something that's present on the ground, let's say, you light it on fire, and all of a sudden the smoke elevates it. So there's an elevation in smoke. Smoke is a process of elevation. And also smoke is a process when something is being nisbatel tzura. It's losing its form and it's becoming something else. It's the process of becoming something else. Yeah. This is the reason that Ketoret, the Gemara says, there are Moshe Rabbeinu, everyone learned this Gemara in Shabbos, it's also a Medrash, the Medrash says, that Moshe Rabbeinu was Ala L'Maila, and he was struggling to find if the Torah belongs L'Mata or L'Maila, and he had to answer the Malachim. So finally he says, it's Har B'nechem, and he answers all these questions saying, the Torah is given to man. Proof is that we have the Yitzhahara, and you don't have father, mother, etc. Then it says, all the angels were giving Moshe Rabbeinu matanas, giving him gifts. What's the matana that the Malach HaMavos gave Moshe? The Sod of Ketores. The Malach HaMavos, the Malach HaMavos, which is the Sod HaMisa, which is the Malach HaMavos. There's a secret in death. And the Malach HaMavos understands the secret of death. The secret of death is not that there's only a kiloyan, that something ends. It's that something is processing into another state. This side of kiloyan was revealed to Moshe through the Malach HaMavos, and that's the Ketores. Because what is the Avodas HaKetores? The Avodas HaKetores is, the service of Ketores is the side HaKiloyan. Is the secret of something expiring, and through expiring, it's being transformed. Something is being transformed. Like the Rambam, let's go back to the Rambam, the Morning of what he's saying is that there's a foul odor, and somehow through bringing this, not only you're eradicating the foul odor, it's creating a pleasant odor. And this has the oimik of it. That in the Ketores, there's a process of kiloyan, there's a process of extinguishing, of dying, of ending, and in that, there's something of rebirthing into another tzura. Therefore, this is what the Rambam says, that Ketoret is a vatal midas adin. There's something about the transformation that Ketoret has, that Ketoret takes something that is, breaks it open, and allows it to be in another space. It's the side of the Avodas HaKetores. Now, we also know that Ketoret also stops the Magefa, and Ketoret also is the cause of the Magefa. So we have to understand how these things are connected together. Again, so the basic idea of the Ketores is that there's an ilui, there's an elevation, something is expiring, something is elevating into another state. This is really maybe what the Abarbanel writes, that the idea of Ketores is nefesh hatzedekah sa'olehin l'mayla. That the nefesh, the person's soul, which you also know in the Kliyaka, the person's soul is being expired, is elevating into another state. That's what the Ketores is. Or in the language of the Rekanti, it's a yichud between Tiferes and Malchus, but something about the Malchus, the state as it is being unified and elevated into a higher state of reality. That's what Ketoret is. Ketoret is the elevation of something and its transformation. And that's what creates smoke. And that's what Avodas HaKetores is. Okay. Now, if you look at the Pasuk, when the Pasuk talks about... all right. When the Pasuk talks about the Ketores, the Simane HaKetores, how many Simane HaKetores does the Torah say you have? How many Ketores does the Torah say you have? Mefurish. Four. So the four it says in the Torah, and 7, the Gemara in Christus Navav, right? We haven't learned this, and 7 of them were said by Chazal. So the Gran Shir Hashirim in Perikei writes that the reason why Chazal added these 7, which the total number is going to be 11, and we'll see what's the important part of 11, is that the Torah calls Ketores both psamim and samim. Psamim and samim are really two separate things. Psamim means fragrance, and samim means a potion. So what is the Ketores? Is it a potion, or is it fragrance? So he says, the Gar writes that the 4 things that the Torah quotes and says that you have to make the Ketores is those are samim. Those are actually, that's the way you create a potion, but you're not creating a fragrance from that. And Chazal added, or they understood, and this is the part of the Messiah, they said there's another 7, which the total number would be 11, which will have the idea of the psalm. And in general, this is the total number. Dafka. Ve'im chisam kol chesmanah chayiv misa. Right? If you chaser, even one simon is chayiv misa. I don't know if you learned the tshuvas over here, the whole machlokes between the Rambam and Rashi, what's the reason, and the Mimabuav and the Beis Yosef. But it means, even today, when you say the Avodas HaKetoros, at least according to the Mimabuav, it's very important that you have to say exactly. That's why, according to some Kabbalah, you have to actually count it. Hatzari, Vatzipor, you count with your finger. Because there's something about the number 11, that we have to get to that full number of 11. Now, you can imagine what the 11, what it indicates, because we know that there's only 10 spheres. So what's the 11? So there's something about the 11th that's a little bit different. There's something about the 11th. The oil of the 11th sphere. What's that sphere? What is that? The Rambam writes, when it talks about the Avodas HaKetoros, and it talks about what are the Ketores, what are the things that we have to bring. In Hilchos Kli HaMikdash, I'm not sure any of you learned actually what the Ketoret says. You did? Everyone learned? Okay. So you know this. The Rambam writes is Amoir Hudam Atzoru B'chaya Shebahodu. The Amoir is blood of a certain animal that's found in India. And therefore, it's a type of psamim, right? Sherei Chatoiv. And the Torah says you should take more, which is going to be the blood of a treif animal, of a non-kosher animal. This is Shittas HaRambam, it's also Shittas HaRamban. The Ravid writes, Ein daiti mikabela shechsisu ma'isa hegdish dam shava dam shum chay ba'olam kol shkein dam chay tmeo. It's impossible that moir is the dam, blood of a non-kosher animal. It doesn't make any sense. A non-kosher animal, that's what we're taking into the Avodas HaKetoros, into Mizbeach HaPnimi? Says the Kesef Mishnah. The Kesef Mishnah writes that he quotes the Rambam, he quotes the Ravid, and he says, "Mashakosov she'ein daite mekabela she'ikonos ma'isa hegdash dam shum chaya kol shkein dam chaya tmeya." What the Ravid says is impossible that in the Mizbeach HaPnimi, in Avodas HaKetoros, they're going to bring in a Talmudic animal, v'amoisu b'ficha. So he says, the reason is Yashlem Shekivim Shenishtana Mitzuras Dam V'Nasika Offer Ba'alma, which means that the reason why it's allowed is because it's Mishtana Tzura. Because the Moir is Mishtana, it changes its form. As it becomes one of the avodas in the Ketoros, it changes its form. It's Mishtana Tzura. I know you're not allowed to bring Dvash, right, in Avodas HaKetoros, but there's a Rabbeinu Yoina also in Brachas that says that sometimes if something falls into something that's not kosher falls into Dvash, the Dvash is Mishtana, the Tzura, it changes the form of the food that fell into honey, and halachically you can eat it, becomes kosher. Which means that there's sometimes something that when it becomes compounded with other ingredients, it takes on a different form. It's changing its form into something else.
Is it honey does that?
Yeah, honey does that. That's not halach, but this is a Rosh also, the Rosh brings it down. Okay. The Seman HaKetoros is like this. Memulach Toyer, says the Orach Chaim, that what is Memulach Toyer? It means that it should be Torah, it means it should be clear. Shelo yir legvanim. Which means that everything that you're bringing in the Ketoros, all the Simanim HaKetoros, all these 11 are collected into one, and they're infused and they become a whole. They become one thing. It becomes one thing, it's elevated, it's Mishtana Tzura. Okay? The Gemara says, Kol Taina Sheinu Mepoishi Yisrael, any fast that doesn't have Mepoishi Yisrael, I don't know how to translate Poishi Yisrael correctly, so Mepoishi Yisrael, is Eina Tainus, it's not considered a full Tainus, because Chelbana, one of the... Yes, the Chelbana is one of the Simanei Ketores to have a foul odor, and yet Chelbana was dafka specifically brought as part of the 11 ingredients. That means we have to include everybody. That a tanis, where people are mispala together, people are davening together, this tanis, this tzibur, has to include also Poishi Yisrael. Like the word tzibur, tzaddik, beinani, v'rasha. This is the definition of a tzibur. It has to include everybody. You need Poishi Yisrael, and the tzibur creates a new metzias. It's mishtana hatzura. When 10 people get together, there's a new form. It's not just 10 individual people. Halachically, it creates a new metzias, a new entity. Tzifra Gabal, it says like this: the Chelbana, that the 11 Simanei Ketores, the 11 ingredients of the Ketores, correspond to Haman and his 10 children. This is what it says. Chelbana, the Arizal brings down, the Chelbana is Gematria 95, which is the same word for Haman. That Chelbana represents Haman. The Kamara brings down Kesem Ofer and Esther also. So we have, in the Ketores, you have non-kosher blood, you have foul odors, and the whole idea of the Ketores is to eradicate. So what's the process over here? There's another famous Gemara. The Gemara says, "Mibnei bonav shel Haman lamdu Torah b'bnei Brak." From the grandchildren of Haman, they learned Torah b'bnei Brak. So from the 11th Simanei Ketores, which corresponds to the Haman and his 10 sons, "Mibnei bonav shel Haman lamdu Torah b'bnei Brak." This is the Gemara says in Sanhedrin Sadik Vav. It says the Yaakov Alasar. The Yaakov writes, and who is that person? Who is Mibnei Bonav Shel Haman? Who is that character? Chazal. Who is this person? The Gemara says it's Shmuel Bar Shilat. Shmuel Bar Shilat is this person that lived, who is a descendant of the Chelbana, which is Gematria Haman, and he learned Torah b'Bnei Brak. What do we know about Shmuel Bar Shilat? The one thing we do know is he was a Melamed. The Gemara says Mavasa in the beginning, V'daitelu, they saw him. But we're going to see soon one important quote that Shmuel Bar Shilat says that we'll understand what Chelbana is. Why does the Chazal tell us where do they learn Torah? B'nei Bonav Shel Haman lamdu Torah. The children of Haman learned Torah. What's Tafka b'nei Brak and what? And they didn't learn Torah in Chevron. What? B'nei Bonav Shel Haman lamdu Torah b'nei Brak. Why Dafka b'nei Brak? So again, in Sifra Kabbalah it says that b'nei Brak is Gematria Hasatan. This is what it says. B'nei Brak is Gematria Hasatan. It's 364. And Satan, we know as a Satan is 364. The Gemara in Yuma says that there's 365 days of the year. And why does it say Satan 364? Because that means that on Yom Kippur, which is the epitome of Avodas HaKetoros, there's no Satan. Ain't Satan vein Pegara. That on Yom Kippur there's a level that there's no Satan. But the idea of Satan is connected to Bnei Brak. What's Satan? Satan is who Yetzirah. And who Malach HaMavos. What's Satan? The Satan is the Malach HaMavos. Is the angel of death. Who gave the Sod of Ketores to Moshe Rabbeinu? The Satan, the Malach HaMavos. What's the imik of this? There's a secret in dying, kaviyachol. There's a secret in the Sod HaKiloyed. There's a secret when something is completely loses its surah, it's completely lets go of its entire form, becomes consumed in something else, or elevated in something else, that means at this point, this thing can actually become something new. When something is mispashet surah, it could be loivish surah. When something completely divests itself of its particular form, when it's added to something else, it can actually transform into another thing. This is the Sod of Hasatan. This is the Sod of the Malach HaMavos. This is the Sod of Ketores. And what did Shmuel Shilat say? Shmuel Shilat said in the Gemara at the end of Tainus, Shmuel Shilat said B'Shem Rav, Mishenichtas Adar Mar B'Simcha. Shlichus Olam Bar Mesimcha, is at Chodesh Asher Nepach Lehem Yogan L'Simcha. That Shmuel Bashilat understood the koyach of transformation. That's something, when it goes into a place where it's Mesiras Nefesh, it goes into a place when it's Mevatel Tzura, then something wonderful can happen. Because a new Tzura can be formed. Dafka Shmuel Bashilat understood the Sod of Ketores. That's Simcha, that's real joy. Joy is, the type of joy is when you go through a process and you go through Ketores, and through that process actually come out in a different surah, in a higher surah. That's why Shabbat Ketores is Samach Lev. Or we learn in Tanchuma that the whole purpose of Ketores is Ein Ba Ela L'Simcha. 1 second. Vada, 1 second, of course. There's 5 Chushei HaNefesh. There's 5 chushim a person has. In the Chet Eitzadas, when it talks about that they saw, they heard, they ate, they tasted, so the Bnei Saskar and brought down many tzaddikim say that all from within the 5 senses that we have, 4 of them were damaged by the Chet Eitzadas. And a chush that the neshama is nanisma. What's the chush that actually your soul takes pleasure from? That's chush hareich. That's a chush of smell. The chush of smell, the chush hareich, the sense of smell is connected to Eitz HaChaim, to the tree of life. There's Eitz Hadas Tovera, which is opposites, which is connected to the Daled Chushim, and then there's something that's beyond that. So let's give a scope of what we're trying to say over here. There is the world of structure and order, which is the Daled Oilamus, the 4 worlds. They correspond to the 4 Chushim. And then there's the Keser Oil Gibei, and there's something that's beyond it. That's the Makif. Some surrounding light that's even larger than that. There's Eitz Hadas Tovera, which is opposites, and then there's Eitz HaChaim, something that's larger that includes everything. Keser, the crown, is the Eitz HaChaim. The crown, Keser, is also Oish's Chorus, is also the letters of Chorus. Because the side of Keser is Ayin. This is the Yesh form of reality, the structured form of reality, where there's a Tovera, the structure. And then there's a side within creation, which is the side of Ayin, the side of Misa. Haroitza lahachyois yamas es atzma, the Gemara says. If you want to live, you have to die. Which means if you really want to live, you have to sometimes pashat surah v'loy v'surah. You have to let go of a particular form and put on another form. This is the Sod of Ketores. The Sod of Ketores is the Yud Aleph Simone HaKetores represent, there's the structure of in general, there's a structure of 10 which is called Kedusha. When the oil and the Kli, when the light and the vessels are in joint unison. And then there's a form of Klippa, which is when the oil can't get into the Kli. So all the oil stands outside and you have 10 vessels, you have 10 kelim. When the oil is makif on something and it's not panemius in that thing, then that's considered a klippa. It's not. There's no unification between these things. But what's the avodas haketoros? Ketores is the ability to take chalbana, to take more, to gather all these elements in this world, all the koiches that are connected to tuma, connected to foul odors, whether it's physical foul odors or spiritual, metaphysical foul odors, to create them in one single memulach, into one single hadek hativ, to create this beautiful one form of potion / fragrance, and then to be malit. And then when you light it on fire and you're creating asham, you're creating smoke, it's poishet surah, it's taking off its form, and therefore it's mislabish surah another form, and it's creating the fragrance, a positive fragrance, and it's an elevation of everything that's happening in this world, of all the klippa and all the things that are negative in this world. And this is why it says in all the svarim, which we learned in the Magen Avraham and others, says that the avodas haketoros is to break down dinim and to break down any mekatering. Because what are you doing in the avodas haketoros? What is the service of ketores? You're gathering all the different elements and things that are not positive. The poishi is so, the things that are not positive, you're creating them into one single form, and you're lighting it on fire to create smoke. You're elevating it, and in a way that it should have the side of Misa, the side of the Satan, of the Lamnu Torah B'nei Brak. The aficha of klipa to kedusha, the transformation of Haman into Shmuel Shilat. That transformation has to go through the Misa process, has to go through the process of a dying Kaviyachol, has to completely nullify its state of what it is in order to become something completely different. And that's the Ketores. He's taking all these elements and creating it to create something different. This is what the Avodah Ketores is, Bizman HaMikdash. So Bizman HaMikdash, the Avodah Ketores is to take all these 11 Samanim, put them together and create this, and create the transformation through the elevation, that it's elevating through smoke. What is the Avodah? What is in our life? What is Ketores? How do we create Ketores? So the Zohar says that Ketores in general, the idea of Ketores, especially the Ketores in Yom Kippur, on the Ketores in Yom Kippur, when the Kohen Gadol entered into Avodah of Kodesh Kadoshim Yom Kippur, and he entered and he created Avodah, he served in Avodah Ketores, that Ketores created a cloud, which became the Ananei HaKavod, and those Ananei HaKavod is the Ananei HaKavod that we sit on Sukkot. That it says that we were protected by Ananei HaKavod on Sukkot, whether the Shita of Akiva, that's not negative, but the idea that the Sukkah represents the Ananei HaKavod, that idea of the Ananei HaKavod is created through the Avodah Ketores on Yom Kippur. The Ketores, the smoke, created a cloud that is the glory of Hashem, the Kvod Hashem, which eventually we sit in Sukkot. Sukkot is Makifim, right? You bring him Makif Bini. You do the whole idea of Sukkot is the avodah of bringing from Makifim into a Pnimi. But the Makifim is created. The Keser is the avodah Ketores. So the Mittler Rebbe has a mimer and says, so what happens now? What's the avodah today? How do we create the Ketores? And how do we sit in the Mizbeach? How do we sit in the Ananei HaKavod today? So the word is like this. That Ketores means, Ketores is the Pnimius, the avodah Ketores is B'chashoy. The avodah of Ketores, the actual service of Ketores, it's very paradoxical. Because the way Ketores is made is dafke through sound. Right? Which means the process is that you make it through sound, and somehow the chanting of these words have an actual vibrational impact on the Ketores to actually make them into the best form. But the service of Ketores, the service of Mizbeach HaChitzon, the external Mizbeach, was loud. It was loud both because what you were bringing into the carbon was a loud animal, who didn't go meekly and quietly, to be offered, and there was the Levium were singing and playing music. So the whole chitzonis, the outer court of the Beis Hamikdash and the Mishkan was loud. That was the avodah of loud. The avodah in the Kodesh was chashoy, was in silence. The avodah HaKohen was b'chashoy, dafke with silence. And certainly the avodah in the Kodesh HaKadoshim was the highest level of silence. That's the deepest level of quietness. This is the Ketores b'yameinu. This is the Ketores of our lives. The Ketores in our lives to create the makifim, which allow us to enter into an ayin, to become into a new yesh, into a new other yesh, is created through the highest, deepest, most personal avodah that a person can have. When a person, that a person should not, no human being should be in the oil, should be present when the Kohen Gadol is makriv, offers on Yom Kippur the Sod of Ketores, the highest level of Ketores that is done. So the Gemara says that not even malachim can be there. Shnikar Adam. That's avodah is a no malchut gdoi. What the avodah Ketores is, bechat ketira is katrana. The avodah Ketores is the most personal bound that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Something that's not to be seen, and that's something not to be observed, something not to be spoken about, and something that's only between me and God. And no one can understand it, no one can experience it, not even angels. But the way Ketores is made is by gathering all the parts of yourself. Just like in the simple avodas Ketores or the external avodas Ketores, where you're collecting the different elements, things that smell a little bad and things that are not so kosher, and you're creating a unified whole to create mamulach Torah, to create this beautiful fragrance. The same thing also in personal in your own avodah. In order to enter into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, with your own Kodesh HaKadoshim, to create the Ketores that will be the makifim through which you're going to sit in the sukkah, which means you will sit for your makif life. That has to be only done b'chashay. You have to gather all these pieces, all the collections, bring it into yourself, go into a place of mamash ayin, go into a place of kiloyin and nefesh, of expiration, ad raza de Ein Sof, until you enter into the Ein Sof, and that's a place only you, no malchut there, only you and God.
But they don't get chanted when you go in there.
That's grinding. That's what I'm trying to say. Simcha, half cup. As you're going deeper and deeper and deeper, it's becoming quieter and quieter and quieter. Part of the reason why the avodah of the creating the Ketores is dafka with sound is to create contrast to the silence the way it's going to serve. You go from sound into silence. You're going quieter and quieter, and as you're moving into the deeper and deeper chambers, into the Kodesh, into the Kodesh Kodashim, it's becoming more silent and more silent and more silent, and less things happening until it's just you and Hashem. And that's the avodah Ketores, where that vapor that expires from our consciousness creates the smoke that's our makifin that allows us to reach a level of the Eitz HaChaim that's beyond the Eitz HaDas Tov Ra, beyond the order, and allows us to truly grow and be transformed. This is what avodah Ketores is. Bekitzer Nimrutz. Yeah.
There is a fragrance that was created through the process of offering the flower.
Yeah.
What would you say corresponds to that fragrance in the personal aroma? In my understanding, there has to be that pleasantness that radiates around the person who is in touch with that inner flow.
I want to tell you that not only is this on a metaphysical level, but it's actually on a physical level.
Very, very experiential.
Experiential level, it's hard to say because some people sweat more than others. But I just want to say that it does say in Svarim, you didn't have to raise your hand, Simcha, because now it's going to be a shaila on you. It does say in Svarim that the bigger the tzaddik you are, the less you sweat. That's what Mamash says. It doesn't necessarily mean sweat, but the less you smell. Which means the less things are rotting. The less bad odors are rotting from your body, or like being expunged from your body. Let's not, so you don't have to say that it's physically or not. Okay, that could be debated. But you know this for a fact. There's also a very simple fact. People that eat healthier sweat their odor. Let's say a child. Even halachically, a graf shari from a tinoik is not considered a graf shari. If you have feces from a child, it's not. And if you have a lucinerella child, when a baby, it doesn't smell, it doesn't odor. Because there's not a lot of other elements that were not able to be elevated. Which means the more a person has a fragrance, I would call it a fragrance ruchni, like a special odor, person's ejecting a certain makifim, like a certain projection of makifim around the person. And the more a person, even physically, is like not toiling and sweating, this is the raya that the person's on a higher madrega.
Thank you. The second point would be maybe to connect with Lag Ba'omer and Rajbi, who
Yeah.
refers to himself as a Ketoret.
Yeah.
So in what sense then would Ketoret be? Because it's the sod of the sod, so to speak.
The Rashbi is b'chad ketiras katana. The Rashbi lived the level of the Yechidish Nefesh. That's what we're saying. The Rashbi was on the Bechina, on the level where his Ketira, he was tied to the source of all life. And that's the place of the Kodesh HaKadoshim Yechidish Nefesh. That's the highest place, the purest, holiest place that only you know and only God knows. Let's take from this side of the room, yeah?
When you say create IYYUN and ambiance,
Yeah.
is that really just accomplished, like you make a list of your midos or something,
Yeah.
and you take that midah and you hold it and you meditate and you're quiet for a minute or an hour, and then all of a sudden, boom, like you did.
I don't know what that...
You can consciously control, like I'm now going to make the IYYUN, like I'm now going to kill myself. I mean,
Chas v'shalom, kill yourself, but yes, what do you mean? A koloina nefesh means that you expire for some truth that's higher than you. That you're mafker chaya for something that's bigger.
is that like just accomplished in thought?
No, it's thought, action, the way you live. What do you mean? The person is machal chaya for something. You're choosing to do something that's not in your usual comfort zone for Hashem, for the truth, for something that's deeper. That's koloin. That's expiring. That's ayin. That's yamos. That's a Sod of Ketores.
So that would be just, I guess, in today's, motivational self-help, they talk about like life begins past your comfort zone.
If you want to say that, I'm not going to argue with that. So that's a Sod of Ketores that the Sultan was revealed.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So we obviously got but,
Yeah.
but
This is trying to say there's an elevation of all this types of energies, of endings, of kiloyan that allows us to be ayin, that allows us to reach the crown. And sometimes it's keser, sometimes it's karas, sometimes it's you end up in the void. In the ayin, you could just end up in the void. And then you just go on. So that's karas. So the same words for karas, which is cutting off, which is the ending of something, can also be keser, could be the crown of something new. Yeah.
I know that in Ketoret, when we learn, have to all be that particular mixture. So, one way to approach growth, I say, is to pick a midah and to say, this is the midah I'm going to focus on to the exclusion of all others in order to correct the other parts. But I know that the ayin has to all be done together.
Right.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, would that be implying that while maybe we should have certain focuses, we can't ultimately think, I don't need to grow there. There's an awareness.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I want to say. It's exactly. You have to take the chalban, you have to take the mar, you have to take that which smells bad, that which is not kosher, that's what comes from you take from the worst possible sources, but it's you. And all those parts, that's why there's a kiloyan of all klipa, of all tuma. That's what IYYUN Kolel is. You're taking all those parts and transforming them into a higher place through the kiloyan, through that it's expiring, through that it's becoming asham, that it's kitar.
So maybe you can share more about the aspect of Ketoret and the Mageva, stopping it.
So that's the, see, the Magefa, the same Ketores can bring death, and the same Ketores can actually stop something to bring something different. In other words, Ketores is the thing that is the ayin that allows for the possibility of another yesh, but also the ayin that stops the old yesh. Stopping something could be the stoppage of something, which could be the end of life. It could also be the stopping of something in order to be something else. So the ayin is like the in-between place which stops one yesh and brings it to another yesh. The magefa is when this ayin is just the end on its own. It's just the pchinas ayin. It's paishat surah. That's it. There's no form. There's no life. There's nothing. And you end up in the void and you die. Kaviyachol. And then there's the other idea is that it actually stops that because it stops that form, that yesh, and allows for a new form to come about. The same Ketores. That's the Sod HaMisa. Misa is either the end of something or the beginning of something different. Yeah.
So would it be fair to
Yeah.
say that Mageva was death that wasn't transcending? That's the essence of it.
Exactly. That's what it is.
In that sense, the Ketoret stopped that because it was just...
The Ketores said, we're no longer here, we're in ayin. Died. Ketores is ayin. Is transforming yesh into an ayin. But that ayin could be now, the side of that ayin could be that it can be mahapech, like Purim, the idea of transformation, or it could just be void, and then it's the end. Yeah. Yeah.
So which one of them Ketores will...
Yechida. Kadosh Baruch Hu?
Like when it says Ketores, so which one, when the transformation happened, like what you explained, the elevation, the expiring,
No,
which one of the five will actually Ketores will...
Ketores is like the Yechida Shebenefesh. The Ketores is the highest level. That's Navoida, the service, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the internal, deepest place of the Beis HaMikdash, that's the place that we aspire to Hashem.
Five, you said there's five, which one?
That's the fifth. Yechidus is the fifth. The fifth. Yeah, let's take from this side, Jordan, yeah.
With regard to the distinction between the offering in on the Mizbeach Pinimi
Oh yeah, I never finished that, but yeah.
versus, well, actually I wasn't going to ask about that.
Oh.
But one,
No, don't have to. But you understand, because secondary means that it's not in order. That's what the Torah is trying to say. This is not part of the regular procedure. This is something that's beyond. This is something magical. Now, magical, something that's beyond, someone could say it's secondary, and someone could say it's most important. And that's really, what you have to do, you have to do. Okay, you have to bring them with mizbeach hapnimi. You have to bring mizbeach chitzon. You have to bring mizbeach chitzon. It's beyond. Oh, that's wonderful. Or it's just the ending. So that's where you have that machlokes.
So what about the distinction between the Ketoret, the service that is daily and that is outside of the Kodesh Kodashim?
Versus the
Like, is there something about the idea like that there's almost like a remez to that service that happens every day, or?
I think the whole idea, the way you make the Ketoret is that you actually the chatchila, you make it. The way it's crushed and the way it's the procedure of making the Ketoret is that pras b'chol yom, that you're originally setting up that there's going to be a pras yom, and then there's going to be a certain process for Yom Kippur. So in the process of making, you're realizing that the kodesh is the inner chamber, but then there's an even inner chamber. And that one is one level of Ketoret, and then there's even a higher level of Ketoret, which is Chat Ketir. That's like the highest level of Ketoret. But there's an awareness of in the process of making of this moving deeper.
And then you have to grind it even more to get
Yeah.
What's the significance of
11? 11 generally represents klipa. That's what the Zohar says, that the Arizal writes. The 11 represents klipa. Why does it represent klipa? It means something that's uncompleted. Because the oir and the kli are not mischaber. The oir of chesed in kedusha, the oir of chesed and the kli of chesed become one. It becomes unified. The oir of gvura and the kli of gvura become unified. But the oir, let me just back this up. The oir is actually chlifa duchtaya. The oir is actually the same light. There's no oir of chesed and oir of gvura. It's the same light of Ein Sof that exists in the kli of chesed and the kli of gvura. So when the light penetrates the vessel, so you have 10 vessels and 10 lights. This is the Oyer Chesed, this is Oyer Gvura, and the Kli Chesed and the Kli Gvura. But when the light and the vessel are not in unison, because it can be it's still makif. So the Oyer stands outside the vessel, and then you have 10 vessels. So you have Kli Chesed, Kli Gvura, Kli Tiferes, but you have the Oyer that's still makif on it.
So that's the 11.
That's the 11.
The or and then the
That's correct. And 10 Kelim. That's 11. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. What?
It's demanding another unification.
A higher unification. It's something that's generally you can do. It's not the order thing, because the order is that's the spheres, Asar Mamaris. That's the order of life. In the order of life, this is the service we have to do. Sometimes you have to do things that, when the or and the kli are not together, you have to do something beyond, something makiftik, something that's deeper. That's the. It's not the midas. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, and then if it did. The avodas Ketores is to take all your midas of kedusha, which is 10, and your midas of not kedusha, which is the chelban and the mor, which represents the 11, and bring them all together into chat katiras katana, into one through grinding, refining, and elevating, and creating smoke and elevating. Yeah.
Two questions. One is this the Indian of the makos, the seven makos? They were each like we were drawing the infinite light into Kalim with each and every mak all the way up until Kesed, the makos vachirs.
Amos taka, Amos.
And
The Arizal writes that.
and then the other question I have is this the Indian of the Beis Yaakov?
Yeah.
When he's talking about Cholam Lehiba El Moed, that is mispashit the tzura of Koyach HaLachira, and then he's just left with the level of silence. I was wondering if that also in meditation. The meditation would be the Ketoret, and the meditation when you get to that point of silence, after you get past all the problems, you're beyond all the problems, you get to that point
Right.
where you just
There's
no more like
no more bechira.
stream of consciousness without like the whole narrative.
No eitzadas tovera. The word from the Ishbitzer is part of the Torah of the Me'ah Shilach. This is part of the Yaakov's Ishbitz. So that it's part of that Torah where the highest level in Ishbitz is to reach a madrega where there's no bechira. But we don't have to go to that Torah. We can hold Ishbitz in the side for a second and say no, because there's no bechira, period. And you can say more like that. That the pshat is that in avodas Ketores, it's such a, you're no longer in a place of confusion and uncertainty and bechira, where it's toiv v'ra, where it's the dalet chushim, which corresponds to the eitz adas toiv v'ra, and it's the chush hareich, which is connected to yechid and eitz chaim. Yeah, simcha.
I think it needs to be led in the guided meditation of going through these.
Maybe next time. Yeah.
Next time, meeting tomorrow?
We'll see. Let me yeah.
It's assimilated by Sukkot,
Yeah.
the schach comes from Selis.
Yeah. Oh, that's very good. Very good.
So,
Yeah. One second. Let's take pictures of people that have questions. Yeah.